In the first video, I suggested that terrorism has a simple solution, which is to ignore it. All the time and effort spent discussing the topic of terrorism is really designed to draw attention from the real social problems. And one of the real social problems is that the internet is clearly not a place where 7 billion people can express whatever they want. So as children, we are taught by the media and by the school system to consume a lot of irrelevant information, that knowledge is a good thing. And once we graduate and get into the real world, we are tricked into enjoying dishonesty and fraud, as I mentioned in my second video. The alternative is presented by people like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, which consists of going back to nature. If you look at it from the perspective of whoever or whatever is in power, and it's in their interest to remain in power, which means maintaining the status quo, then the ideas like those expressed in the Unabomber's manifesto, or in the previous video I mentioned Bertrand Russell's In Praise of Idleness. Another example is The Sane Society by psychoanalyst Erich Fromm. These kinds of ideas have to be very tightly controlled, because they don't criticize one particular aspect of society, but they go one step further by criticizing society, the way our society is organized as a whole. That's extremely dangerous, and it becomes exponentially more dangerous if you have a free internet where 7 billion people can exchange ideas and have discussions about these sort of things. Now, if you notice, the three individuals I just mentioned are either dead or in prison. And I didn't pick them out for that reason. It's just very hard to find people on the internet who are alive and who can match the quality of thought, the quality of the ideas of these three examples. This leads to the question, how does the system that we live in keep these dangerous ideas under control? The very idea of an internet is a horrible idea in that respect. The three individuals I just mentioned all developed their ideas and wrote what they wrote before the existence of an internet that was accessible by the general public. So why would you want to open up the internet, which not only dramatically decreases the barriers of entry to any potential author of ideas that are critical of society, and give people the opportunity to find other like-minded individuals who had absolutely no hope of ever finding each other before the internet, because there's too many people, if there really are 7 billion people on this planet. One reason we can think of why the internet might be helpful in maintaining the status quo is from the perspective of a thought police that tries to keep track of individuals. So let's say that there's some kind of a database of the 500 most dangerous individuals. You don't want these people to spread their ideas or to interact with each other in any way. It would be very easy on the internet to keep track of what they're doing and make sure that they don't bump into each other by accident. Another great benefit is the internet as a cheap form of entertainment that keeps people so busy, preferably with passive activities and little human interaction. That's not just inexpensive in terms of computational resources, but it might also keep people so addicted to consuming irrelevant information that they have very little time for anything else. Let's think a little bit about how difficult it would be to implement a thought police on the internet. The very first line of defense is going to be that you want to get people to be passionate about very specific causes. Take, for example, the war on drugs. So you have one side that says the legalization of drugs would be an easy way to solve the problem. You can easily keep these people in check by creating another group that fights against it, and you end up compromising on something like decriminalization, which ends up accomplishing almost nothing. And in any case, devoting yourself to very specific causes misses the point. So you might be in complete agreement with somebody regarding the war on drugs, and then when it comes to the issue of climate change, you might be in complete disagreement. And then at that point, you have to really ask yourself, why is that? Let's say you can manipulate people into passionately pursuing various causes that are completely arbitrary in nature. Well, that's a perfect control mechanism, because people are going to wind up becoming their own enemies. This is not just idle speculation. The system really does encourage us to arbitrarily pick a side and then passionately fight for it in every sort of way. In my high school English class, my teacher asked me, does life imitate art or does art imitate life? And he challenged me in front of the entire class to pick a side and then argue in favor of that. And when I spent a little bit of time thinking about it and not saying anything for a few seconds, he didn't like that at all. And later, in private, he told me, if you don't want to participate, you don't need to be in this class. I got kicked out of the class. So clearly the system specifically trains you to quickly pick a side without thinking much about it and then fight passionately in favor of that side. So if you can get most people caught up in very specific issues, it makes it that much easier to identify those who take a more general approach. So if you get identified by a hypothetical thought police as having improper thoughts, then every time you express something online, those ideas simply have to be quarantined. At that point, the thought police has two choices. Either the information is only visible to select individuals who are working as part of the thought police, or the information is visible by everyone except other individuals who are also considered to have improper thoughts. You may remember that in the second video I changed my IP address to a Swedish one before I did a search for my own video. But of course, if there is a thought police, I'm sure that they have complete control over any computer that I own. And you might ask, well, what if I were to, take a plane to Nicaragua and go into some random internet cafe and do the same thing? If I am able to find my own internet content, does that disprove the whole idea of the thought police?